Hi, today I'm going to be presenting the things I found, the results I found on the research I conducted on my economic analysis of the costs around the airline industry, especially comparing the point-to-point business model and the hub-and-spoke business model to see which model is the best at coping with the cost that an airline has to incur. So first, I want to tell you why I decided to research airlines. Well, ever since I was little, I have been in love with traveling, and my favorite part of traveling has been always the airports and the way that the airlines and the airports work together to create this incredible logistical system that allows people to travel around the world. So in my review of it, I mainly found that there has been a lot of evolutions in the airline industry, mainly that there has been that the evolutions of the airline industry have always been shaped by the way airlines manage their costs. And this ultimately led my research into the cost of airlines. And well, I found out that airlines have a lot of cost and not a lot of profit. In the revenue of a flight, revenue is distributed mainly by these factors. 29% of all revenue goes directly into covering the cost of fuel. 20% goes to covering the cost of salaries. 16% ownership costs related with having the planes, for example, depreciation and things of that nature. Taxes, maintenance, and other costs also take a huge chunk of the revenue of the airlines. Ultimately, profit is around 1% of the revenue of each flight, which is very little when you see it in this perspective. Ultimately, I found that the cost of an airline are divided into three different industries. The airline industry, the cost of the salaries and the logistical work that is done inside the airline. The airplane industry, basically the industry that is in charge of building and selling the airplanes and maintaining the airplanes. And the airport industry. The airport industry is super important because it is the factor that allows an airline to fly and to basically create routes and destinations. And well, they are in charge of charging the landing fees, the taxes, etc. So I came across two different strategies that airlines use to deal with this the cost of flying. And basically it is a point-to-point model, which is based on direct travel point A to point B, direct flight non-stop, and the hub-and-spoke model, which is basically a model that is based around connections. Basically, for you to get from a passenger to get to point A to point B, the passenger needs to make a connection in a hub airport in order to get another flight and get to point B that way. That is a hub-and-spoke model. And as I investigated about these strategies, I asked the question, which one is better at managing the costs? So I first want to talk a little bit about the airline industry. Basically, that the market structure and some of the things that around the airline industry. The airline industry is organized in an oligopoly structure. Basically, a very small amount of firms control the whole market. And there are a lot of entry barriers in order for a new firm to enter this industry, because you need a lot of investment, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of permits, and a lot of human capital. There are a lot of costs. As we saw before, there are a lot of costs and not a lot of profit in this business, and that is the reason why so many airlines have failed in the past. We have Pan Am, we have in Mexico, we had Mexicana de Aviación. These giants of air travel have ultimately gone bankrupt because of the costs. And there are the two main business strategies, the point-to-point model and the hub-and-spoke model that I described earlier. After doing my research and comparing these two business models, I ultimately concluded with my thesis, which is throughout the analysis of the way that each model manages the cost, I have concluded that the point-to-point model is the best business strategy in this modern era of flying. So now let's go into contrasting the pros and cons of each business model. First, let's begin with the hub and spoke model, which main premise is to take people from nowhere to everywhere. So as you can direct your attention to if you direct your attention to this model, you can see how the hub and spoke model works. Basically, for you to get from point A to point B, you have to pass through a hub airport, which is labeled as H. These are the spokes, this is the hub. And the advantages of this model is that you don't need as many planes as you would need to connect every single airport individually. You only need 6 to connect the whole network, 6 routes to connect the whole network. And basically the premise behind this is that you basically funnel low demand routes into high demand routes through a hub. And well, this is characterized by a high route dependency, which is because since all the routes are connected, they all depend on each other. And well, normally airlines who use this use bigger planes in order to carry as many people from a hub to from a spoke to a hub, and from the hub to their destination. And well, this is a model that is used mostly on legacy airlines, which are old airlines and very big airlines such as American Airlines, which we will analyze later. However, this model is relatively antiquated and has a lot of inefficiencies in it. One of them is that the big planes that are commonly used in this model are not very fuel efficient. The fact that they need to carry long haul capacity planes decreases the amount, the fuel efficiency. And as we mentioned before, fuel is the biggest cost that an airplane has. So the fact that they use a lot of fuel does not help the profitability of a firm. They also, this model also promotes the double dipping of a lot of costs. When you do a connection from a hub from a spoke to a hub, you land twice. You spend you double the amount of money you have to pay in landing fees, in the appreciation, and in maintenance. You also have to pay for taxes and other costs that are related to landing and beginning flight. Also, there is a lot of route dependency, which causes a lot of inefficiency. Imagine if one flight in the network gets delayed, it basically screws up the whole system, and and this system usually promotes a lot of logistical errors. For example, like the fact that they need to land, wastes a lot of time in the land, and an airplane that is not flying is ultimately losing a lot of money. This ultimately doesn't help profitability of a firm, and this is why so many legacy airlines have gone broke in the past years. Now let's move on to the point-to-point model, which promises direct flights to basically everywhere. The point-to-point model is characterized by its route independency. Basically, since there are direct flights, as you can see in this model, the routes are not connected with each other. For this hub the hub and spoke model is a relatively modern business model, which has been made profitable by the fact that newer planes are cheaper to maintain and are way more fuel efficient than older planes. And the fact that fuel efficiency, being such a cost saver, has made this ultimately the best business model in the airline industry. So it requires new fuel efficient planes, and it saves a lot of time and logistical efforts because of the route independency, because you don't have to land twice, and because you don't have to incur in that double dipping of the cost and in the waste of time that has to do with landing twice per flight. Success is based, as I said, in fuel efficiency, and it allows the creation of long and skinny routes. Long and skinny routes are long routes in distance, but with skinny demand, because since fuel efficiency saves money, airlines can give themselves the luxury to create routes that are not necessarily that don't have as much demand. This model is not perfect, however. It needs a lot of planes to work. As you can see in the diagram that I showcased earlier in the last slide, you need a lot of planes to connect every single airport to every single destination. And this is when you require a lot of flights and a lot of routes, you also require a lot of airport gates. Ultimately, this is a problem of economies of scale. You need to be very big in order to be successful, and that is a bigger entry barrier for an oligopoly, which already has a very high entry barrier for new firms to enter. However, I want to put these two business models into perspective and in a real-world context. First, let's analyze a hub-and-spoke model airline, an airline that uses a hub-and-spoke model. An example of this is American Airlines, which is a very big, very old airline who uses the hub-and-spoke model in having a lot of hubs scattered throughout the continental United States. They have hubs in O'Hare Airport in Chicago, JFK in New York, LAX in Los Angeles. So they show a profit margin of only 7% in September 30, 2016. Meanwhile, Ryanair, which is an airline who uses the point-to-point model in Europe, it has a lot of destinations, it has a lot of new planes, and it basically has a lot of, and it cuts a lot of cost in logistical inefficiencies, and it saves a lot of time. They have a profit margin of almost 59% as of September 30 of 2016. You can see here how two airlines with different business strategies can have the impact that the different business strategies have on the profitability of the companies. American Airlines has had months and years where they don't even make profit. They are in red numbers. They lose money. Meanwhile, Ryanair is always making money, and the best part of Ryanair is that they offer very cheap flights in Europe. Like their flights they cost 9, 10, 15 euros per flight, which is very cheap compared to the average cost of American airfare. So how would we be able to promote that point-to-point model in the airline industry? As I mentioned before, we need to basically solve the problems, the imperfections of these problems, and decrease the entry barriers that are caused by the problems of economies of scale that are native to this point-to-point model. The first solution that I propose is a short-term solution, an immediate solution that can help airlines move faster to this model, and it would be to subsidize fuel-efficient planes. This would incentivize airlines to buy newer, fuel-efficient planes that don't require as much maintenance. They would save a lot of money in the airport, in the purchase of the airplane in the short run and in the long life of their investment. This would also have a positive externality in the environment, since the fact that there are more and they're using more fuel-efficient planes requires less fossil fuels being emitted to the atmosphere. This would, however, not benefit airplane manufacturers who don't necessarily focus on fuel efficiency, but rather in capacity, such as Airbus. But I think that in the long run, it's been more beneficial to the market if we promote fuel-efficient planes. My second solution is a long-term solution because it requires a lot of investments. It would be to increase airport competition. How? By building a lot of airports basically everywhere. By building and also around big airports. For example, in London, they have their main airport, the International Airport of London, which is called Heathrow, and they have a lot of airports around the nearby cities, which are used by budget airlines and who use the point-to-point model. I want to proliferate that model by incentivizing the creation of airports, which the building would increase, would create new jobs, and the maintenance would also create more jobs for society, and it would connect the world through more airports. It will also decrease the cost of having to land on airports, because since there's more supply of gates, of runways, airlines are going to be able to negotiate, have a bigger negotiating power over airports in the fees that they charge with every landing and every every gate. Finally, I want to last thing about the second solution would be that it would not benefit big airports that are accustomed to control in the airports industry in their area. They would not be benefited, but I think that consumers and airlines and the society as a whole will be benefited in the long run by the creation of more airports. My third solution is also a long-term solution, would be to promote international long and skinny routes. The fact that the point-to-point model is based on fuel efficiency allows for the creation of routes that don't necessarily have a lot of demand, but that could really benefit society as a whole by connecting the world. And I think that if we promote and we move bureaucracy into an international policy that allows all airlines to travel around the world in these fuel-efficient planes, I think that this can create real incentives for the airlines to seek new markets and take advantage of these opportunities, ultimately moving to a point-to-point, more cost-efficient model of business. Now, as a conclusion, I would like to tell you some of my ideas for further possible research on this topic. I live in Mexico, and we have a very young airline market, an air traffic market, and I would like to see how the evolution of developing country of the airline industry of developing countries moves towards like a point-to-point model, if it can move, and what factors determine a success of a point-to-point model or of a hub-and-spoke model specifically in a developing country such as in Mexico. So that was my research. I hope you like it, and thank you for your attention. These are my sources.